lot, Minister Razavi, for this encouraging and inspiring words. And I would pass the word to Professor Werner Sobek.
Thank you. I'm a little bit speechless now because this was the perfect introductory lecture. So what should I add? Ladies and gentlemen, and I always take some joy to call him Magnifizenz, dear Peter Middendorf, Ecole Razavi, dear friends, den Bürgermeister begrüße ich separat und dann verzeiht, und die Präsidenten. My indirect chiefs or bosses, even if I'm retired, but being still a member of the Chamber of Architecture and the Chamber of Engineering. And liebe Familie Otto, schön, dass Sie da sind. On the occasion of I have to change my contents a little bit because something have been already said, so it's the disadvantage of coming behind you. On the occasion of the 100th birthday of Frei Otto, we look back at the work of a man who made significant contributions to the development of the 20th century architecture. We reflect on the achievements of someone who researched in Stuttgart for more than 3 decades and who thus was one of us, or at least of the generation of our academic teachers. I'm sure that over the next 2 days we will hear in many ways how the work of Frei Otto and his team has influenced architecture and structural engineering worldwide, and especially the related building research. As someone who studied under him and succeeded him in 1994, as someone who got to know the inner workings of both Stuttgart faculties, the Faculty of Architecture and Urban Planning, and this was the name at those times, the Faculty of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I'm one of the few still living and comprehensively informed witnesses of that time. That era was marked by outstanding scientific achievements at our faculties and a great spirit of departure. At the same time, it was characterized by a number of interpersonal conflicts and disruptions. As a student and later as a doctoral candidate, I found it very difficult to understand where these dissonances among several of our faculty's prominent figures came from and why they endured for so long. They also and ultimately led to a scandal during the evaluation of the third funding of the Collaborative Research Center SFB 64. But my position as a boundary crosser between the faculties allowed me to gain insights from both sides. It became clear to me that all these fractures ultimately trace back to the roof structures of the Munich Olympic Games, a building and roofing project of unprecedented kind. Günter Behnisch had won the competition. Frei Otto had been developing the entire technology since the 50s. And Jürgen Jödecke, most of you won't know that, has published a sketch weeks before the competition's decision, illustrating his vision for the Olympic facilities with a striking resemblance to what was proposed by Günter Behnisch. Fritz Leonhard was the chief engineer. He passed that responsibility to Jörg Schleich. The structural basis for the roofs, which no one had been able to calculate before, was developed by Theo Angelopoulos and Klaus Linkwitz, both mentors and later very close friends of mine. It was naturally that tensions arose. And of course, personal grievances came into play again and again. Who was the author, who was the consultant, who merely a contributor? In my view today, one factor dominated all others. It was the deeply differing scientific approaches to implementing a project of extraordinary and multidisciplinary complexity. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. The tools and methods of interdisciplinary scientific work only began to emerge at our faculties after 1972. It was Frei Otto who demanded and promoted this way of collaboration, who sought to bring together individual disciplines. The SFB 64 was intended as a nucleus. Interestingly, SFB 64 only held together for 8 years. 8 years in which fundamental work was done on questions of design, form finding, construction, etc., etc. 8 years that solidified our university's global reputation as a center for lightweight architecture. But the dissolution of the SFB 64 was nothing else than the failure of a last attempt to mend the never overcome interpersonal rifts. From the collapsed SFB 64, the SFB 230 natürliche Konstruktionen emerged. It was Frei Otto. It was a continuation of his works, perhaps now with different emphasis. Again, interdisciplinary collaboration was essential, this time between Otto's team, biologists like Johann Gerd Helmke, anthropologists, zoologists like the bionic expert Werner Nachtigall, and many others from our faculties. This cooperation now worked. The SFB 230 produced a wealth of significant insights. It was a valuable puzzle piece in the image we try to draw today of how we might and should build in the future. Unfortunately, at those times, there was no institutionalized academic teaching at the then named IL Institute. Young people interested in the topic had to knock persistently, I made the experience by myself, before they could contribute through voluntary studies or student assistants working as students' assistant, we call them hibis, to what was avant-garde. I personally and always found it regrettable that there was no lectures on lightweight structures in architecture, on natural construction, on biology and building, and many other topics where Frei Otto had done pioneering work. Ultimately, the chance was missed to bring together generations of students early and on, and to instill in them an awareness for what we now recognize as vitally important. For me, it was self-evident upon taking over Frei Otto's chair. I would offer courses on the mentioned topics to students of all faculties, not just architecture and structural engineering. And thanks to my wonderful assistants for over 25 years of researching and teaching at the Institute, thanks to my wonderful assistants, we achieved excellent results over the years. It became possible, especially through joint seminars, collaborative theses, interdisciplinary dissertations, to multiply our knowledge. And it was the students and doctoral candidates with their talents and applications who often gave crucial impulses for the Institute's development. In the year 2000, when I also took over Jörg Schleich's chair, I symbolically merged Frei Otto's IL, which was more architecture focused slightly, with Schleich's more engineering oriented KI, Konstruktion und Entwurf. It was not allowed to him to call it Entwerfen und Konstruieren. This was a big battle for more than 6 months. It was not allowed to change the name from Institut für Massivbau to Institut für Entwerfen und Konstruieren. He had to call it Konstruktion und Entwurf. Not the verb, but the substantive. It really is a big difference. So what did I do? I merged them, and I took the abbreviations IL and KA, and I made not an ILEK, because it doesn't sound very international and not very nicely to speak it out. We called it ILEK. And ILEK is a brand in the world. Since 25 years, ILEK is something everyone knows. So this was the merging, a symbolic act intended to begin healing the rift between the two disciplines. A divide made manifest at the latest by founding the École des Beaux-Arts and the École Polytechnique. This was the official split of the building master education. And we said we are going to bind them together in this symbolic act. Beyond research and teaching at the Institute's classical fields, one thing was especially important for me: placing interdisciplinary collaboration on a scientific foundation. That means replacing the customary mere declaration of intent to be interdisciplinary, with the provision of a toolkit of methods and instruments. And at the Institute, it was always about understanding the entity in the interpretation of Humboldt, not just the details within a single scientific discipline, as it is typical to the Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxonian academic system. It was always about the search to understand the entity. This search for understanding the whole ultimately enabled us to ask questions and provide answers that went far beyond what was still commonly understood as building. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, building is acting in the world. It influences more than any other human activity, social interaction, resource consumption, waste generation, and the emission of greenhouse gases. Building is an integral part of the whole. It cannot be considered as a single discipline. Not for people which take their job, their profession serious. Frei Otto saw it this way. I saw it this way. And I'm very thankful Lucio Blandini sees it in the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in human history, a climate damaging action taken by someone, somewhere in the world, have a direct impact on my living conditions, even on our chances of survival. In former centuries, we called that Brunnenvergifter. The penalty was death. Nowadays, I call it Atmosphärenvergifter. And the interesting thing is the effect of a Brunnenvergifter is regional. The effect of an Atmosphärenvergifter is global. For the first time in human history, this is a fact. And I condense this to a short statement, and I call it my thesis number 18. You might have read the other 17 already. You should do so. They are short, easy to memorize, and I think we brought it to the point. It's not only me, it's my thesis. So, thesis number 18. Your doing is touching my being. Say that to everyone in the world. So let us make this sentence a guiding principle, a memento, also in reference to all that Frei Otto and other representatives of the Stuttgart School of Lightweight Architecture at this very place did. Your doing is touching my being. This awareness can change the way we build. Living by it can enable a future for all of us. I wish you a very successful symposium. Thank you for organizing this, and I thank you all for listening. Thanks.